bread and the energy of life. Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger. John 8:8, Western English Bible. Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger. All great things happen in silence and in secret. Great matters, great thoughts, great feelings, all come into being in silence. Christ had to fulfill a great deed. He needed to be silent as he wrote on the ground. They brought a woman before him who was caught in the act of adultery, in a public crime, and they asked him, "Master, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery, and in the law Moses commanded that those who are such to be stoned. And you, according to your teaching, what do you say?" Jesus stooped down, wrote with his finger on the ground, and settled a great law, whether one should be killed, and, if one were killed or condemned, in what way it should be done. And when he solved the issue, he rose up and said, "Whoever among you is without sin, let him be the first to cast a stone at her." The conclusion we can draw is that judges ought to be sinless people. If they ask me today why the world is unstable and hobbles around, it's because all the judges are sinful people. A judge who can be bribed with money, a judge who can be bribed by public opinion or for his own personal gain. What would he bring to his nation? I ask, can a nation with judges like these prosper? Never. Consequently, the person who takes up the position as judge by making judgment according to the words of Christ must be sinless. Because if sinless people come, even if they beat you with stones, not only will they not kill you, but you'll be resurrected. These stones will fall on top of you without harming you. But now people who are full of sins climb to positions of power, and when they beat you with stones, they harm you. Consequently, the judgment from a righteous person brings life, but the judgment that comes from an unclean person has no life. It is said that Christ stooped down and wrote on the ground. Now, as I speak here, some of you have notebooks. You write things down. Some write with good intentions, and some write with evil intentions. Some come with the goal of learning, whereas others come with the goal of writing something contradictory, to say this is incorrect. The person who says that it's incorrect, I will say that he is sinless and accept the first stone. But the one who is sinful should shut his mouth. And when God speaks, all the sinful mouths should be silent. Well, now the world must remain silent. If sinners' mouths do not remain silent, God will shut them. If you don't believe that God shuts mouths, go to the cemeteries. You will see that all mouths are closed there. For the last 8,000 years, God has been closing every person's mouth. Hence, those who die are sinners, and those who are born are righteous. This is the conclusion that I draw. When Christ stooped down on the ground, he said to the woman, "Try to give birth to righteous and pure people in the future, because the way you have given birth to them nowadays, they will not produce a good result. Strive, woman, to give birth to something better, because both those who believe and those who don't believe have set out on a bad path. You have to make a little effort to give birth to something better." In order to give birth to the beautiful and the sublime, to what is noble in the world, which is not born in an environment with a glass in one's hand in the pub. It's not born in a courtroom where someone is being hanged. It's not born on the battlefield either. It's not born in the diplomatic arena, nor in any of the intrigues that are going on now and in the past. Only children of crime are born there, thoughts, desires, and criminal actions. And Christ said to them, "Whoever among you is without sin, let him cast the first stone." They knew the law, and one by one they all went out, because if they didn't, they would have fallen to the lowest depths of the earth. They all went out. From where? From the inside out. Consequently, according to the same law, when your Pharisees and Sadducees make a ruckus about this prostitute, you will say to yourselves, "Whoever among you is sinless, let him cast the first stone at her." And Jesus remained alone with the woman and said to her, "Woman, where are your accusers? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I accuse you. Go away, and from now on sin no more." Now you will say, "This woman is guilty. Women are always causing mischief. They're not good for anything else. When God created man, there was no mischief in the world. But when he created woman, there was mischief." This is what the opponents of women say. But the issue is that if the world had remained without women for a long time, wouldn't there have been greater mischief? I draw a conclusion. The Lord said, in order to prevent the emergence of even greater mischief, let women come. You will say, "How can you prove this?" Well, how would you prove it? We prove things only when we act according to the same principles, using the same quantities. If I give you several quantities, x to the first power, x to the second power, x to the third power, x to the fourth power, and if I operate with x to the fourth, but you operate with x, how would we understand each other? Are these two quantities equal to each other? If I operate with x to the third, the difference is greater. If I operate with x to the fourth, the difference is even greater. Consequently, morality is an unknown quantity. What is morality? And they rightly say that morality is created for weak people, because when the strong one steals, no one can punish him. But when the weak one steals, everyone punishes him. If a lion comes into the sheepfold and steals a sheep, you say, "It's a good thing he didn't snatch me." But if a measly little butcher comes into your sheepfold and drives away the sheep, you'll raise a stick and hit him, saying, "You better know not to come in here again." And now the contemporary world is filled with these measly little butchers, whereas the big tigers and lions are not subject to the law. And the common people have grasped this, and they say, "The law is only for weak people, but not for the strong." But I say, the law has to be a law for everyone, from the smallest to the greatest. This law has to be absolute, and it must be applied consciously by everyone, not with guards. If you're an honest person and make use of guards, I doubt your honesty. If you're an honest person and make use of prisons, I doubt your honesty. I would like it if there were no prisons and guards, so it can be open everywhere. And then I would say, there are honest people here, but now there are guards everywhere, soldiers, prisons, and they say, "These people are cultured and upright." I ask, with such baggage in contemporary thoughts, with such a grasp on life, can we make sense of the inner meaning of life and give it a proper directive? Because what is the goal of home? Isn't it the children? What is the goal of the church? Isn't it the worshipers inside who have to be what? Honest and loving people. What is the purpose of the state? Isn't it the subjects? What do they have to be like? Consequently, Christ laid down this fundamental law, that everywhere only the righteous must mete out punishment. When we understand this fundamental law, there will be a great reform in our social life. Who do we hire as a teacher? Isn't it the person who is capable and educated, not someone ignorant? People have come to this conclusion in all branches of science. What conclusion have they reached in the church? For instance, in a church, in a religious school, the priest must not only have graduated, but he must have another morality. He needs to be absolutely pure, sinless. But now they say, don't look at the priest's deeds, but look at his robe. We can't look at the robe, which is our own human invention. But the Lord made people who need to be noble. They say, look at his hat. What can we see from the human hat? From the human mind? Why don't you tell me one noble human thought that man created up to this point? I haven't found even one noble human thought so far. Why can't we create noble thoughts? Because we live only for ourselves. Our morality is based on selfishness. And we say, when I'm right, the world is perfect. Go into the homes, into the churches, they have the same morality. While the husband provides everything for the household, he's kind and dear. There's no one else like him. But the moment he's unable to provide, the wife says, he's stupid. When he loses his money, he also loses his mind. I ask, how is it possible for the mind to be inside the money? The money is a product of the human mind. They are a symbol, an emblem that man has set in motion. It's interesting when people say a person becomes stupid when he loses his money. I say the opposite. All people who have money are the stupidest. But those who don't even have $5 are the most honest people. When you don't even have $5 in your pocket, you don't rob anyone. But when rich people meet, they start gambling. They rob one another. And this is how they perverted the proverb, implying that whoever loses his money also loses his mind. But it's actually the opposite. This is also how God proceeds. When he wants to correct someone, he takes his money. Now the women also say, how so? Can one live without money? Well, did your first mother give birth to you using money? Or was it without money? I will tell you about an incident that occurred in Sofia several years ago. A poor clerk didn't even have $5 in his pocket. He received a very small salary. Nobody gave him anything. His wife gave birth to a child. He said, oh, this little one, how can we find a way to baptize him when we have nothing? He went out one day and found a banknote for 100 leva. So he baptized the child. On the day the child was born, his employer promoted him. His affairs went well for 8 whole years. The child died after 8 years. On that very same day, they fired him from work. He lost his house, and he came to the same material condition in which he used to be when his child was born. I ask now, did the child make the money come into being, or did the money make the child come into being? What we need in the world is a child that can enlighten the mind and the heart, so we can understand this great law of love that makes geniuses out of mankind, but not like those geniuses who destroy everything, but geniuses of goodness. And when Christ stooped down to the ground, he whispered to her, woman, looking at the revision I'm making, I see that you don't point your children in the right direction. And indeed, the earth is to blame, which is why the Lord is punishing her. I don't take the earth in the same sense as you see her. You have to reason a little more philosophically. When you take a seed or an acorn, and you want to understand the acorn, can you understand it only by examining it? No. You have to create the conditions so it can grow. In the same way, the earth will also grow. It will create conditions that are thousands of times better. If your spiritual sense punctures through the ground and comes out of it, you will see that the ground is not as it seems. The people who say they see the ground are still at the very bottom of the earth. This is how it is with the fish. They only see the water, but not the earth. In order to see the earth, you have to remove yourselves from the conditions in which you live. In the same way, the fish say, "Everything is in the water." I ask, is the culture more developed in the ocean or with us on the surface of the earth? If I tell you that when you come out of this ocean, there is another earth with a different culture, you will say, "He's off his rocker." If you tell the fish that outside the water there is an earth with a more developed culture than theirs, they too will tell you that you're off your rocker, that one of your planks is loose. But no matter, the plank should always be loose and clattering. When the priest's eyelids blinks, when this plank clatters, the worshippers go to church. I would prefer that the ocean waters clatter, that they make noise, rather than be still. Why? So they can warn me the still waters are dangerous. I prefer rocks that make noise. Why? So they can tell me there is a barrier, an obstacle. I would like it if the trees make noise. When is the only time for silence? When the person wants to do good. When contemporary occult science says that silence is required, it means that one must be silent until a certain idea is born. Once the idea is born, there must be noise so it can grow. And now, in modern society, there must be a positive philosophy, a correct understanding of life. This correct understanding will bring in those elements that are necessary for our growth. We didn't come to Earth as guests, yet the Earth is a great school in which we came to learn. Consequently, every one of us must know what to learn. The mother says, "Thank God, I gave birth to 4 children. I can now pass away." But she worries about who will take care of her children when she dies. The merchant wonders to whom he should leave his house and money. The ministers and the priests all worry about who should inherit their property. I ask, is this something important in the world, being a minister, a king, or a bishop? This is a secondary thing. Being either a man or a woman is something secondary. Someone says, "Should I be born a man or a woman?" It doesn't matter. It's a secondary thing. Whether you'll have a mustache or long hair is something secondary. That's not the point. They argue whether the child should be male or female. Under present conditions, female children are dangerous. Why? Because we need to give at least 10 to 15,000 leva for these round-faced ones. So not only will you sell your daughter, but you will also pay for the sale. How strange today's culture is. There was a time when they married off their daughters. The father was given a sum of money, and they made clothes for her sisters. The current people have turned the world upside down. Now everyone must work. Why? We have 2 daughters, so we need money so they can marry. And marriage is also not something important in the world. It's something secondary. I ask you then, have you ever thought about the essential things in life? We must dwell on that great fundamental principle. Someone will say, "Hey, these are empty things. What could be essential?" No, there are important things, and when you solve this essential question regarding your life, you will solve the issue individually for yourself. Where you come from, what you're going to do, where you're going to go, what are your powers, how are you going to be able to develop properly in this world, and other things. You say, The mother raises the child, she creates it. If I tell you the opposite, that the child creates the mother, and the child is the one who compels her to work, what would you say? Observe what happens in nature. Take that chicken who runs away from a person's shadow. When she has a little chick, she puffs up and throws herself against the person, against some ox, in order to defend it. And the ox runs away. Where is that courage from? The ox knows that this bird is dangerous. There's another misconception among people. They say that one must be old in order to be wise and rule the world. Up until now, only old people ruled it. But since they couldn't fix it, now the young ones are coming. The old ones are saying, when these young ones come, they ruin the world. They want to project their mistakes onto the young. No. You ruin the world. You are the ones who have to correct your mistakes. Do not get offended. In my view, an old person is one who lives within himself. Now the old person says, there was a time when I used to do a lot of things. Now I can't. Now he passes for a saint, a fine-looking old man. Yes, now your legs can't even hold you up anymore. Look into his younger years, and there you'll see him. In our philosophy, we're not fooled by the visual transformations of the human essence. I would ask then, what is essential in the world? Few can answer. If you say the mind can deteriorate. Someone knocks on your head. Your brain stops working logically. You can't reason. You can't speak. I ask, what is the mind? Scientists say, the combination of cells in the brain breaks down and man cannot reason. Well, there are 3 billion cells in the brain. Then where is the person? When the brain fails, man ceases to think, but thought itself is not the man. Thought is only one condition for man. It is only the physical, the lowest in man. You will say, then man is in the heart, in the feelings. Yes, but the heart and the feelings change. A man who loved his wife, when he becomes old, he says, I'm tired of that old woman. When she becomes old, a woman who loved her husband starts saying, why doesn't that old man get away from me? But he strokes his mustache while looking at some young woman and says to himself, hey, look at that young lady. But then he excuses himself and says he was joking. No, he's saying the truth. There are no jokes in the world. Sometimes, when he's unable to do something, a man says it was just a joke. In the Russo-Turkish War, 2 Russians stopped in front of a fish pond. A nice carp caught their eye, but they didn't have money to buy it. In order to get it, they decided to argue with each other. They argued, and a fight ensued. The fishermen looked at them and started cheering, clapping. One of them grabbed the carp and threw it at his friend. After 5 to 10 minutes, the carp was gone. If anyone made a comment about this event after the first minute, they would have said this was all a joke. But after 10 minutes, the carp disappeared. When some things can't be achieved in the world, there are jokes that can justify this by trickery and craftiness, so we can use them to make excuses for ourselves. Then what is essential? If I say the human soul, you don't believe in it. You don't have the experience. Have you ever had a conversation with yourself? We uphold a science in which everything can be tried and experienced. Have you ever had a conversation with your soul? Well, how can you have a conversation with your soul? This is the greatest question. As long as you can converse with your soul, you will understand many great things. And as soon as you cannot converse with your soul, you will be a first-class fool. The soul is the mother of man. Man has 2 mothers in the world. Maika, mother, is Maya, yeast, that which wraps man in matter. this mother has given him all the delusions. There is another mother which is called the divine soul, and Hindus call it nirvana. When you enter nirvana, you will forget all your misfortunes, and you'll be ready to bear your own sins as well as the sins of everyone else. When Christ says, "Unless you renounce your mother," he means that Maya, who says to you, "I gave birth to you, you must listen to me, you must have morals, but you ought to try and secure yourself in life. You are allowed to commit a crime for your own good." This mother didn't raise her children well. She's going in the wrong direction. How do you, mothers, raise your children? You say to your daughter, "You must feed yourself well in order to look full and healthy so you can be liked. You should smile." This mother didn't understand her daughter's soul. She's acting like she has a cattle before her that she's trying to sell. You will excuse me, but the word govedo, cattle, has a different meaning in my mind. The letter G refers to a divine quantity. The mother has a treasure that she's using the wrong way. For instance, you have an ox and you prick him with a goad so he can work. But when a stork comes by, the ox raises his tail and runs away. I ask, did this ox set his mind to run? "Something is buzzing," he says. I now read in the newspapers that the price of bread has been raised to 6 leva. All the newspaper vendors start buzzing. "The bread is 6 leva, the bread is 6 leva." But then it fell to 4 leva. All right, and they lowered their tails. The next day the bread raises to 8 leva. And they raise their tails again. Why do we put a price on bread when we have these kinds of understandings of life? When the Lord gave bread on earth, he forbade people from selling it. And the greatest curse in the world is the fact that this great blessing is being sold. Selling bread and flour is absolutely forbidden. And after all this, we ask ourselves why the world is bad. The first condition is that bread should be given without money. There is no greater dishonor than to go and buy bread, to have it sold to you. The people in the future will marvel at the current people and why they would be such imbeciles. The imbeciles of the 20th century are the ones who sell and buy bread. Furthermore, the theory is that the first people who abused the sale of wheat fell into misfortune and bad luck for 4 generations. Do not think that this karmic law can be forgiven. I'm not saying this so the change would come all of a sudden, but the thought of giving bread away without money must come into your minds, that the bread must be without money, because that's how it was meant to be from the very beginning. Not a single memory must remain of selling bread. And Bulgaria needs to be the first country to apply this rule. The bread must be without money. Let me get back to something. The bread will be given without money only when Christ's words are fulfilled. He who brings this law into being that the bread must be without money, he must be a righteous man. If he's a sinner, he will create a worse law. Hence the bread must be without money. The one who creates this law must be a righteous man, a wise and noble man in the highest sense. And now, do you know how many women, how many girls there are in the world who have sold their honor just for bread, who have lost the highest and noblest part of themselves just for some bread? And now we sit around and say, "Lord, thy will be done." Let your will be done, but may our will come into being. This is how we must always pray. We walk around with nice clothes, with top hats, yet these sisters of ours are soaking in vice. Why? They sell their honor for a loaf of bread. Well, how can we justify this? Us fathers, mothers, ministers, kings, teachers, and professors, you will say, "This is how the Lord created these things." This is a lie. You made these things in the previous generations. Consequently, We have to fix those things that the people made. If someone destroyed another person's house, the wise ones have to fix it. This is why this great impulse must enter into us. And we shouldn't merely say we belong to some school and say that God is like this and like that. I ask, do they sell bread in your city? Yes, we are cultured people. Black bread is cheaper, whereas the white bread is more expensive. I say, I have a different opinion of you. If this understanding in the world doesn't change, life in the future may become 100 times more terrifying than it is now. In the span of 100 years, the people will degenerate just from the fact that they mix limestone, sand, beans, and other elements into the bread. Why do they make these artificial mixtures? Everyone is trying to gain more money. Now you, religious people, will say, this is not our business. There are statesmen who will take care of this. When a cloud hovers over the earth after floating around in the sky, is it formed only out of a single drop? Isn't it the case that every drop in it has the ability to come down, to wash away something once it falls down? It's trying to do some good. These thousands of drops wash the flowers, grasses, and everything begins to grow. We are now these drops of water. Unless you apply your mind, desire, and initiative, how will all this come about? The Lord said to one of the Jewish prophets, when you seek with all your heart, you will find the Lord. What does it mean to find the Lord? It means that this great law of love begins to work in you. What should we do then? This is how I resolve the matter. If you start eating the most simple food, the kind of food that the poorest people eat, you will create a great current that will soon fix the world. Yet now we sit for lunch and start eating one dish, a second dish, and so on. There are people in Sofia who spend 1,000 leva for dinner, while others spend 50, and some go to bed hungry. And then they bring an adulterous woman like this, who committed a crime just for bread, and they ask Christ, what should we do with her? Christ answers, whoever among you is without sin, let him cast the first stone. You have become a collective cause for this woman's condition. And in order to set this woman straight, you must be absolutely pure. According to the teaching that now comes from the invisible world, you need not a palliative purity, but an absolute one. When purity comes to anyone, he will be powerful, strong, and there will be no discouragement. Purity is health for the human mind. Purity is health for the human heart. Purity is health for the human soul. The first hygiene is purity of the mind, of the heart, and of the soul. The new teaching has medicine for healthy people. In the world, we have prisons for criminals, hospitals for the sick, institutions for orphans. But we don't yet have institutions for healthy, wise, and good people. Only a small attempt is made in schools. If this attempt is undertaken in a way that causes all the prisons to shut down, as well as the hospitals, and to have everything turn into schools, there will be a different result. But now the doctor comes, he takes the pulse. The pulse is 120. The heart is abnormal. The liver is upset. But what are the causes for these disorders? The bread. I can do an experiment with you. There must be hygiene when kneading in the future. Sick, dishonest people should not be bakers, but honest, healthy people should be bakers. When such a person needs bread, he must sing all day long. I would advise you women to do this following. When a woman is indisposed one day, to invite one of her sisters and say to her, Sister, I am indisposed today. I am not worthy to need bread, so do me a favor. If you are indisposed, this is like leprosy in the bread. You say, "Today the bread hasn't been kneaded." I say, "It's neither kneaded nor is it baked." Why? Because we went and caught the adulteress. Yet the fact that some person sells bread for money, we say this is a law in society. I want you to resolve this issue within yourselves. If you don't resolve it, there are other forces that are coming and they will fix it. They'll resolve it. In the world, there are intelligent forces, forces of reason that are so strong that any person who is unprepared, do you know what will happen to him? I will tell you. When there is a lot of dust on a drum, what happens to the dust? They take the stick and hit the drum. Similarly, you are also on the drum, and when that man with the mace strikes you, you'll bounce 1,000 kilometers off the drum. When it comes to this law, they're not going to ask how you are, what party you belong to, but they'll ask you, "Do you buy and sell bread for money?" "Yes." Off the drum you go. Bang! Someone assumes a high position. "Do you buy and sell bread for money?" Off the drum you go. Both kings and ministers. They'll all go flying in the air, down to the last one. The great Lord who made the world will say, "You have no right to sell the blessing I have bestowed upon you, and to corrupt both your sisters and your brothers." Now, try and accept this within yourselves. You will say, "I have my own particular beliefs." Down with your beliefs. There is only one law in the world, the law of love. Do you want everyone to feel this great love? Do you want this thought to be for everyone? Why shouldn't we desire this good for everyone? This won't come all at once, but we must constantly work in order to prepare ourselves. We need that inner one, as you call it. When some wife's husband brings meat and bread, she says, "My dear." Bang! Off the drum you go. Now you, women, must preach. The bread must be without money, as the Lord said originally. I will give you a project. We'll see how much bread Bulgaria needs, how many acres of land it needs, and I'll be the first to work on everything without money. We will plow, we will reap the fields, so that the bread will be for everyone without money. We will all go to work in the field in order to make bread for free. Is there anything wrong with that? We can mark off as much land as we need so it can give as much bread as necessary. And regarding everything else, we can say that God is good, because the Lord's Prayer says, "Give us this day our daily bread." Now the newspaper vendors write, "Bread costs 6 leva, 8 leva. What are we going to do? How will we survive?" I say, let's create Article 4. Let's create Article 10. The bread should be without money. Let's portion off a certain part of the land for all the citizens, so everyone can work, so we can make the bread without money. Then they won't bring the adulteress before us and say, "Teacher, what should we do with her?" Whoever is without sin, let him cast the first stone. In order to explain my thought, I will tell you a story. We have to obtain this great truth in the world. A king had 3 daughters. They were all born at different times. They all had different abilities, but the youngest one was the most beautiful, the most virtuous. Because she was so beautiful, her father kept her locked up all the time so that no one would lay eyes on her. The neighboring royal sons learned about this beautiful royal daughter, so they sent matchmakers to ask her to become their queen. The father, along with some of the wise men, wanted to find out which of the young men would be considered worthy of her. Hence the father dressed 10 girls in servants' clothes, and he put his 3 daughters among them. His youngest daughter was with a blackened face. The matchmakers came, and the king said to them, "Choose whichever one you want." Upon laying eyes on them, every royal son chose the nicest young woman among them, saying,
"This is the beautiful royal daughter. She's the one." Nobody paid attention to the ugly one among the young women. They married off the first one. However, the affairs in the kingdom didn't go well. All the young women married one after another, but none of the royal sons ended up with one of the three royal daughters. One of these royal sons, who was the wisest and most noble, when he came as a guest, he wanted to offer the greatest honor and respect. But as he bowed down, he fell down and broke his leg.
Upon seeing this, all the maidservants who saw his broken leg ran away. But when the ugliest one saw this, she came to wrap his leg and said, "No worries, this is just an incident." He said, "This is the royal daughter." He recognized her. We modern-day people don't recognize the most beautiful daughter, but the one who is dressed in rags is the one who wraps our leg. Now these three sisters have to come into the world. Everyone is always talking about love. Everyone talks about truth and wisdom, but they don't have love. I asked many people, "Have you experienced love?" "Why, of course, my heart burned." I say, "Love may burn, but it doesn't scorch." Someone says, "Well, what I once experienced with my young wife caused my heart to burn." "Is it burning right now?" "No." I say, "This fire is fake. You haven't experienced the divine fire. The divine fire isn't used to roast chickens and lambs. It beams and beams. It creates all the fruits. Everything blossoms and becomes fruitful on it. The first attempt we made during the time of the war was for the people to recognize this idea, this living energy, and all the clergy was in an uproar. I understand this energy as the kind that gives life to everything, which makes everything ripen. This energy only comes in the morning, during the sunrise. It doesn't come in the afternoon. This living energy doesn't come from the sun. I won't tell you where it comes from. You will say, "Where is the Lord?" In front, behind, but not beneath. You say an enemy comes from everywhere. Yes, in the circular movement, the enemy comes from everywhere. But this living energy doesn't come from everywhere. No living being descends from the path where this energy comes from. It is the only one that descends and comes down. Even the angels can't pass through this path. It is a peculiar living energy. Then what does the clergy say? The clergy says you don't need to search for it in the morning in nature, but here in the church. If this power were in churches, I ask, where's the life then? Which church is it in? Why don't you name even one church in Bulgaria in which a person can come to life after being brought in it? Yes, the living energy is in the church, but where is this church? It's in a church where this living energy resides. If you have the law of wisdom in your mind, the law of love in the heart, and the truth in your soul, this living nature will manifest before you in a particular way. You can check this for yourselves. I will explain the law to you, which oftentimes causes some good children to be born, along with saints and geniuses. It's because the mother went out at the exact moment when this living energy came down. Sometimes when this great energy current ends up falling on someone, a great and wonderful idea is born. The good doesn't always come. Life doesn't always come. It comes only at certain periods, during predetermined times, when the Lord comes, when this great power comes. You only have to meet it one time, and you'll receive all the good in the world. All you have to do is meet the royal daughter once, and you'll say, "I understand the meaning of life. I'm ready, Lord, to do your will." But now this one wrote this, that one wrote that, saying there are such and such regions, that heaven is like this or like that. Where is heaven?
Have you been there? This heaven is not as you know it. Regarding the heaven I often talk about, your foot cannot enter there. The person who bought and sold bread ought to know that not even a hair from his head can end up there. People who bought and sold bread cannot enter the kingdom of God. You will check and see this when you go up there. You will read this sign in heaven. The human foot that buys and sells bread cannot set foot in this paradise. This is a bitter truth, but a great truth. This truth needs to be applied on earth. And in the future, all the people must eat bread without money. You are not allowed to sell bread to your brother. This is the new teaching. And if many of you apply it, you will have the blessings of all the forces that work in all good people on the face of the earth. Do not think that there are no good people on earth. There are good people, but their names are not written on lists here on earth, but up there in the world above. The person who has his name written in some church shouldn't be fooled. These lists are empty. Regardless of which society or church you have your name written, it's not valid. There's only one book in which it's important whether your name is written there or not, and the people who are registered there are called the children of God, daughters and sons of God. They are the people who are ready to sacrifice themselves for the good of mankind. There are still empty lists in this divine book, so you can also write your names there. Now, when some of you look at me, you say to yourselves, "It seems like this man really wants to set our hearts on fire." This is the most sublime thing I am talking about, that you can write the following: love, unity, and agreement. Unity with God, agreement with God, who is love, and who loves everyone. Agreement with God, who wants to turn everything into order and organization. He put some children upside down, like the trees, for instance. Others he turned into crystals. He made some into beetles, flies, cattle, but he turned some into people with 2 feet, and they think. We're not all like our brothers. Wait, your heads haven't come out of the ground yet. One day we have to become trees with leaves, flowers, so this tree can come to life. When they brought the adulteress to Christ, he wrote this on the ground: "You are far from understanding God's ways. You are still far from being able to pass judgment." This is what Christ wrote. And Christ continues to write even to this day. When the wife scolds her husband, Christ writes again, "Lord, did I really have to marry such a stupid man?" Christ writes again, saying, "Woman, if you are without sin, throw a stone at him." The man says, "This ugly creature who sucked the life out of me until now, she made me the most unfortunate man. How did I end up with such a woman? I should have found a more beautiful one." Christ writes, "If you are without sin, throw a stone at her." The teacher at the school says, "These children, this pack of pigs whose mothers gave birth to, why did I end up with them?" Christ writes, "Whoever is without sin, let him put his hand over this pack of swine." The priest says, "Where did this congregation of hypocrites come from?" Christ writes, "Whoever is without sin, let him be the first to cast a stone on this congregation." And now Christ writes something about everyone, and the people start coming out. How do they come out? They say, "Ivan died last night." Is that so? May God forgive him. "Mara died last night." "Some minister died." I say that everyone is coming out of the church. Everyone is coming out one by one. And only the woman remains, the adulteress, the most honest, the most noble, the most sincere soul that they brought to Christ was this adulteress. Woman, I don't judge you. Go and sin no more, because there is something sublime within your soul, something noble. Do you know what became of this woman? I won't give a conclusion to my lecture. I'll let you conclude it. The wise can infer much, even with just a little. Love is not bought with money, and it is not sold for money. Remember these things. Truth is not bought with money, nor is it sold for money. Wisdom is not bought with money, nor is it sold for money. Righteousness is not bought with money, nor is it sold for money. Virtue is not bought with money, nor is it sold for money. Lecture held on the 22nd of May, 1921.